In Tuscany, Italy, hearty cannellini beans play a large part in shaping the region's cuisine. Also known as white kidney beans here in the States, cannellini beans are creamy rather than mealy, and they have a soft, slightly sweet flavor. Now, you can certainly buy cannellini beans that are already cooked and canned, and these canned beans can also play a really valuable role in the kitchen, especially when you're trying to get a meal onto the table and fast. But in the test kitchen, we believe that when beans are taking center stage, usually in the form of a soup or stew, you can't beat using dried beans. And when cooked correctly, the dried cannellinis become plump and they have a hearty, toothsome texture. Not to mention that during the cooking time, we have ample opportunity to infuse the beans with flavor from the liquid in which they simmer. Now, there's a lot of bean cookery folklore out there. Do you soak the beans or not soak them at all? And if you do soak them, how long? And when do you add salt during cooking, if at all? Well, we've made batches and batches of beans to get to the very bottom of all the folklore, and here's the deal. If you want evenly cooked beans, and I'm assuming that you do, soaking is a must. In fact, we found that an overnight soak provided the most tender and evenly cooked beans. Now, it takes a little forethought, but this hands-off day before prep shaved an average of 45 minutes of cooking time the next day. And when it comes to salt, we've heard many experts warn against adding salt too early in the cooking process. Some claim that the salt toughens the beans, and others profess that the salt turns the beans to mush. But we found that simmering beans in salted water does indeed affect their structure. The negative effects were that the interior of the beans were mealy and gritty. However, the salt tenderized the tough skin of those very same beans, especially when the salt was added early in the cooking process. So we wondered if there was any way to use salt to tenderize the skins without turning the interior into a mealy mess, and the solution was to brine the beans. By soaking them overnight in salted water, the salt slowly softens the skin. However, as the skin does not allow the salt to penetrate into the bean's flesh, the interiors remain creamy and not mealy at all. And it really doesn't take much salt to brine a pound of beans, which works out to 2 cups. Let me show you. You simply dissolve 3 tablespoons of table salt in 4 quarts of cold water. And you stir it to make sure it's all dissolved. Then you just stir in the beans. And you let them soak at room temperature for at least 8 hours or even up to 24 hours. Now, when you're ready to use them, this is exactly what they look like. They're a little bit plump and they're slightly softened. Now, you do want to drain the beans and rinse them well, and this will wash away any excess salt from the exterior. Now, if you don't have time for an overnight brine, here's a quicker way. Just combine the same amount of salt, water, and beans, but in a Dutch oven, and you bring it up to a boil over high heat. Then you remove the pot from the heat, you cover, and you let the beans stand for 1 hour. And you want to rinse those beans well, and they're ready to use. Now, these quick soaked beans won't be quite as creamy as the overnight brine beans, but they will be superior to non-soaked beans. So, start brining your beans.